It's Lucky Paper Radio with Anthony Maddox, Parker Lamascus, Jet Crowdis, Patrick Doherty, guest judge Bones, musical guest DJ James Nasty, and your host Andy Mangold. Dear listeners, Andy Mangold.
Let's dive into another episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy, and I'm here as always with my co-host Anthony, Perfectly Average Maddox.
Right in the middle at the salt box where I guess I deserve to be.
I assume with a lot of 2 1s and 1 2s, it sounds like?
Yep, 2 1s, 1 2s. That's how I'm rolling these days.
See, I dropped in for one day, and I went 0330. Also average, but I get a pin.
I'm jealous. I'd be so much happier with a 3-0 and an 0-3 than all these 2 1s.
And the 0-3 was in my own cube, which I would argue is a moral good. It's morally good to 0-3 in your own cube.
So I'm curious, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but I feel like you playing your own cube for the first time, you might be just like way too in your own head about like what's going on and end up just kind of like crashing out. Is that what happened?
We will talk about it. We're just coming off Saltbox Weekend here in Baltimore, our local Cube event, or one of our annual local Cube events at least, and it was the inaugural drafts of Take 5, which is the new Cube I've mentioned a couple times in this show and I've been talking a lot about on the YouTube channel, which we'll put in the show notes if you want to watch videos of me talking for hours and hours and hours about the design of this cube. I basically brought it to this event completely untested. I'd never played it before. I'd done a couple of drafts with 7 other humans just to see what a draft felt like, but no matches had been played ever. So it was an interesting experiment that we'll talk a bit about. But before we get there, we have a guest on this episode. Joining us for our shoebox recap is, of course, Judge Bones, a.k.a. The Sheet is Noisy.
Hello.
Bones is staying in my guest room, and I asked him, how are the accommodations? Anything I could improve on? And he was like, well, it's a little cold, and the sheets are, there's no other way to say this, noisy.
Would you describe the noise?
I did to Andy actually earlier.
I know, I'm hoping you do it on air. That's why I'm doing this to you.
Yeah, so, you wake up early, it's bright, you cover your head with a sheet, and then every time I would turn my head, it would be like... and it just woke me up more.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I'll
throw some fabric softener in there next time I wash those sheets, I guess.
Is the issue the sheets, or do you need the window covered? Because I also don't know if I can relate to the, you wake up, you put the sheet over your head.
Well, I've
never done that before.
Because there are skylights in the room that Bones is sleeping in, but they have full window shades. But it sounds like maybe pure darkness is very important to you.
Apparently.
Pure darkness, pure silence. You need to be in a sensory deprivation chamber in order to get any sleep at all.
Yeah, because I turn my head, I hear, and I'm up for the day.
Well, I'm glad to have you, and I'm sorry about the noisy sheets. I'll work on improving that for next time. But you were here as head judge of Saltbox, year 2 of 2. You're here back, head judging the event again. We're going to talk about this event. As I mentioned, this was kind of the inaugural showing of Take 5. It was also the inaugural drafts of your new cube, Arcane Lessons.
That's true.
How inaugural? I get the sense you've probably done a little bit of online play testing, maybe a little more than I've done for Take 5. How new is this cube?
So last year, or maybe very early this year, I had the cube pretty fleshed out, and I just wanted to get a sense of what it might play like. So we did a draft on Draftmancer and played on Cockatrice because it doesn't, you can't make the weird rules work.
Right, yeah.
And so I got kind of an idea, but I made a lot of changes. Obviously, with Secrets of Strixhaven, a lot more changes came through.
Yeah.
And leading up to this event, I wanted to get it as ready as I could. So I also had some player aids printed, and I wanted to see how that went. So last week, right before this event, I had 4 locals and I, just to get a basic sense of what the gameplay was like, how people who are in the dark about the cube are going to respond to the player aids, how that would go. So I had a sense. I had played a match and a half of this cube, but
in a 5-player draft, which isn't the most telling necessarily. And did you make any changes after that 5-player draft?
No,
or you were just let's just do it, and then you were well, yeah, that was kind of what I expected.
I that draft was 3 days before my flight, so I really didn't have a lot of room after that. But I had a good idea of what to look out for, what to remind players about, and what players might misunderstand about the concepts.
Why don't you give us a pitch for this cube? Because I think people listening probably have no idea what Arcane Lessons is. The name implies a little bit, but there's quite a few rules modifications in this cube. Give us a little 30-second elevator pitch or 2-minute elevator pitch. Why not? Big elevator.
Yeah, as soon as you said,
talk for 1 hour. That's what a podcast
oh, yeah.
is.
Just to talk for 1 hour about your cube. Anything I will just check out.
Yeah, we see that 30-second. I was like, I don't think I can do it. So the short version is I had the idea, what if instant sorcery spells had changeling? We know about Tim's excellent changeling cube where all the creatures have every creature type. What if you had your instant sorcery had all the spell subtypes? So those are trap and adventure and arcane and lesson. And now we have a couple more like omen. But at the time that I had the idea, it was just those. Not a lot of good ways to make trap or adventure matter. A lot of the adventure matters are creatures with adventure spells. So making lightning bolt and adventure doesn't do very much.
Right. And the trap is like they gave it a type so the cards that work in a certain way would sort of be signaled, and it would sort of make it easier to understand the cards. But there's nothing there's no rules associated with a trap type, right?
Are there no cards that care about traps being cast in the history of Magic?
There's 2. There's one that is a demonic tutor for any trap in your library that you reveal and put in your hand.
Okay.
That's not exactly a demonic tutor.
Well, okay, yeah, fair. The other one is target opponent reveals their hand and discards all traps.
So both of those probably too good for this environment.
Yeah, I don't want you to get him to Tarox because you leaned into the theme.
Because you played cards in the cube.
Yeah, I quickly whittled down to, okay, the types that are relevant and interesting and have good play patterns are Arcane and Lesson. Lesson just being interesting in that you can learn any instant sorcery that you draft. I thought that was very cool. And Arcane, anytime, I'm sure others will relate to this, you're designing a spell slinger cube, it can be like, okay, and what's green doing? Because green has not a lot of non-creature payoffs, and even fewer instant sorcery specific payoffs. Just the mechanic from Kamigawa was nicknamed Spiritcraft when you cast a spirit or arcane spell. That had a ton of interesting angles to go with in green, and that's been some of my favorite parts of this. And then I get to do the thing that I always do, which is what I did in Amankar as well, which is like mashing up 2 planes and bringing the vibes of Kamigawa and Strixhaven together and giving it kind of that flavor of like, this is the Kamigawa studies class at Strixhaven University.
Is that the sum total of the rules modifications? Just that?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
I went so much longer on the quick version than I thought I would.
No, this is good. Again, our job here is to fill up an hour. That's the goal.
So that's the idea, is Arcane Lessons. Then the rules mod, beyond every instant sorcery, is an Arcane Lesson. That's the emblem. That's the big one. I also gave every player a copy of Environmental Sciences, which is one of the just basic mana fixing lessons from original Strixhaven people might remember. You can put it in your sideboard. You can put it in your main deck, whatever you want to do with it. And then the big one is I give you a spell satchel, which starts on the battlefield. People have said, Bones, how many cubes do you have with something starts on the battlefield? And I just want to shout out Daniel Wheatley for the original inspiration for starting something on the battlefield with the Reading Rainbow, which
he will not hear this, but thanks.
I thanked him in person
We
this
will
weekend.
if we send it to him and tell him to listen.
So yeah, he was the original inspiration for that in Igandra Drift, and then I did it again in World War of the Spark, and now I've done it here in Arcane Lessons. So Spell Satchel is an artifact that says Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it gets a book counter. It can tap and remove a book counter to add a colorless mana, or you can pay 3 mana, tap it, remove 3 book counters to draw a card. And that gives you a lot of interesting early double spell potential and kind of get your engine running. And late game, I find in Spellslinger cubes, you often are kind of building to a big turn, and the big turn doesn't always kill your opponent. And then you have something to do. You got all these counters on the spell satchel. You can start drawing cards, kind of get back in the game and try to finish it.
Yeah, your big turn is you like built up and cast a huge Genesis wave or big token creating spell or, you know, a Dragon Storm or something.
Yeah.
But you build up a big board, but the game's not literally over.
Yeah. I mean, you empty the Warrens and you got to, Storm Count 6, and they had Pyroclasm. So what are we doing now? So that's been a really interesting piece of the texture of this cube that I really enjoyed.
So wait, the environmental sciences, that starts in your sideboard always? Because that's a lesson that you want to go...
Everything's a lesson.
Everything's a
Right.
lesson.
That's my next question.
I found that a little confusing, but no, the environmental sciences you can put anywhere you want, right?
It's in your pool. So you
Okay.
can put it in your main deck if you want. You can leave it in your sideboard if you want to learn it.
Talk to me about these other 2 rules modifications. Were they something you introduced to solve a theoretical problem that you saw with the sort of base rules modification of everything is an arcane lesson?
When I first had the idea, I'm fleshing out the cube. You've talked before about my process of just having a Scryfall list that I just scroll through and add cards to a list, and then I dump the list into Cube Cobra eventually. I was looking at all the cards with Magecraft, like all the payoffs for instant sorceries matter. And this one, I did the same exact process that I did whenever I was building Igandra Drift, which was, whoa, Spell Satchel's so cool. That's perfect. Whoever has this is going to have probably an advantage. Well, I should give everyone one. Well, what if only one person draws it? Okay, well, I'll give it to everyone on the battlefield. The exact same thing that happened to me with Mech Hanger.
Do you think it's a particularly powerful Magecraft? I mean, I've never played with this card, but looking at it, it doesn't seem like I wouldn't think, oh, the player that has this will have an advantage. I think it's cool, I agree, but you think it's like a power outlier in some ways?
I do. It is not as powerful. There's a Secrets of Strixhaven card that just came out that is kind of similar. I think it is a book, and they have a new book artifact type. Mm-hmm. It gets a counter for every instant sorcery you cast, and then it costs like 5 tap draw card. It costs 1 less for every instant sorcery you cast, and eventually it's just
tap draw card.
Yeah, draw card, which is crazy. I don't think
the draw card mode of a spell satchel is what you're excited about mostly.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to let you, be double spelling early, but I really think that the last ability, it was underestimated all weekend. And not every, but many drafters were like, I didn't really get the spell satchel, but after playing a couple of games, I immediately was like, oh, this is sick. I like this. Mm-hmm. The environmental sciences, I just remembered in original Strixhaven how valuable it was to your ability to be a little bit flexible and have maybe off-color lessons that you could learn and be like, I'm going to play 1 swamp, and if I get this, then I can take this whatever powerful black spell that I saw late, or even a gold spell, 1 color on, 1 color off. I'm going to keep that 1 basic, and then I can learn.
Because you can always learn for your mana fixing. There's a really inefficient way to get to your mana fixing, because when your learn is just getting a pretty overcosted spell, that's not, generally speaking, the highest upside you want on a learn spell. But if you've built around enabling a splash or something, that could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
You brought this cube to an event. Sounds like essentially untested, a little bit of like playtesting of a prior version of it online, but it's changed a lot since Secrets of Strixhaven, and then a like 1 of 5 player draft that didn't result in you making any changes. So, maybe you had a little more knowledge, but like it wasn't like you were doing that to inform, balance or making sure you didn't include any like busted cards or anything. Did you have any fear coming into an event where you were just putting this in front of players, essentially not having been put through its paces fully?
No, but I've done that a couple of times already.
Okay, that's not a new thing for you.
Yeah, World War of the Spark was the same at CubeCon.
Okay.
It got added by staff. I submitted it. It got picked, to my surprise. And then I was like, oh, well.
Did you say in the description this cube has never been tested?
No. My initial thought was, CubeCon does its voting so far in advance. If it goes through the voting and whatever and it gets picked, then I can build it and test it and see if there's anything with it. But I really like the concept. I'm not going to put it into the voting if I'm not confident in the concept.
Right.
I was like, yeah, this is cool. And then it just happened, no voting or anything. It was just like, okay, yeah, we want it. And I was like, okay, then I'll build it.
Yes, I'll go do it.
So that I had a very similar thing where I had drafted it, I think in a 6-pod before CubeCon, and then CubeCon was, they put it on coverage. It was crazy.
I mean,
that was a little scary. I was like, okay, this is one thing, like to put it in. It's a different thing to be like, and we're putting it on coverage.
And we're going to document it for all time and broadcast it to hundreds of people.
And Gavin drafted it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, let's talk about both of these experiences then. I mean, it sounds like you weren't burned by your experience with World War of the Spark.
No, I just trust my instincts, I guess.
Now, serious question, and I'm going to ask you to answer this for real. Do you think you are just that good? I mean, genuinely, like you spend a lot of time thinking about cube design, obviously. You're like one of the most invested people in this community I'm aware of. Do you think that it's just because you have designed enough cubes, played enough cubes, judged enough cubes that like you have a pretty good sense of making sure you're not like doing something that can run amiss? Or do you think that this is advice you would give to anybody that was interested? Like, yeah, don't worry about it. Just like run your cube.
I don't think this is advice I would give to everybody. I have a lot of instincts that I don't fully understand and I trust and have seemed to have worked out that I can't explain. And I'll be like, well, this is the way that I feel like it should be. And then eventually, sometimes it's made clear why that was a good call that I just didn't understand. But I mean, I am like talking about this or that in cube design like every day of my life to people. So
yeah, we were just talking about reading, and you're reading a couple new books, and I was like, yeah, I do a lot of reading. I've read so many thousands of pages of the novel of Cube Discords.
Yeah.
I'm reading every day. So much reading. Okay, so didn't get burned by World War of the Spark, and it sounds like Arcane Lessons went over pretty well as well. How did you feel about the first 4 drafts of Arcane Lessons at Saltbox?
I feel good. I got a lot of interesting feedback from very good players that I trust the opinions of a lot. Some contradictory feedback, which I always enjoy.
Always happens.
And it's interesting. I'm certainly making a couple of changes, but I'm not overhauling anything. One of like the most major possible change is maybe not giving everyone environmental sciences. The very first rough draft of the cube, I was offering everyone a mascot creature token of their choice, like the Inkling summoning or the Pest summoning from the original Strixhaven, because in a Spellslinger cube, maybe you don't have enough creatures, and so you want an instant sorcery that procs your spell satchel and other effects like that also puts bodies on the board, so you're not just casting spells and passing. I was like, I don't know that this complexity is worth the addition, so then I stopped doing that. And maybe environmental sciences is the same. where it's not worth the complexity. Because again, you just pointed out how many rules mods there are, and that's a couple of the questions I received over the weekend was, is this many necessary?
I do think it's very subtly and strangely confusing to have one of the cards you give them be an actual printed lesson in the cube where that doesn't actually matter at all. Like, I get that it's a colorless mana fixing land, but my first thought was like, wait, you give them a lesson, but everything's a lesson.
Yeah.
So it feels kind of strange, just like a coincidence that like the spell you want to give them happens to be like, you know, in printing one of the types.
Having done the cube speech 4 times in a row this weekend, I do think maybe that's one I could shave, but it's one I'm going to think about. It's, you want to, you know, in design, get down to the minimum necessary that's all pulling its weight.
So I'm curious, just like overall, how do these rules modifications shake out? Like, what are the implications? I'm guessing like the first big thing is any card that has the text learn lets you get any instant or sorcery from your sideboard. So that leads to maybe some changes in the draft where you're taking things a little bit speculatively, like this is a situational card, or I'm like not sure I'll have the mana to cast it, but if I can go get it later, it might be pretty powerful. Are there other ramifications to the lesson specifically?
I think it makes your really late picks pretty interesting, even if it's purely off color. If you have a single card that makes a treasure token, maybe it is going to be relevant. There's a situation where you've got a learn spell, you got the treasure token, this dead pick that you wasn't in your colors, maybe it's going to come up in this game.
That makes sense, yeah.
One of the changes to that end I'm considering is putting in the tri-lands from like Shards and Khans of Tarkir, just to have random off-color fixing that, you know, you're in red-green and you took Savage Lands, well, maybe this black will come up. Players mentioned that they enjoyed that over the weekend, and that was kind of my goal, was having these random cards that you picked in the draft come up relevantly outside your colors. The other thing is that even on color cards, sometimes you just want to put in your sideboard for a specific reason. For example, when I drafted on last week, I was in a red-green deck, and I put Empty the Warrens in my sideboard specifically. I never wanted to draw it. I only wanted to get it when I had already cast the Learn spell for the turn. So I was getting minimum 4 goblins for 4 mana.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. A thing you put in your sideboard, if you have 3 or 4 different Learn cards in your deck, is actually much more accessible than something that's just in your deck. So yeah, I could see some really interesting ways to build decks that are really focused around a single card, which is, I think, something that in a lot of different ways cube designers have tried to, you know, make cubes that have that aspect.
Kind almost like a companion or something that you have access to every game in some rules mod.
And then Arcane is a spell type that doesn't have any intrinsic rules baggage, right? It's just something that other cards care about.
Right. There is a famous mechanic, Splice onto Arcane, which is so parasitic. I know it's one of the first things people think of when they read Arcane, but if you get an engine going with Splice onto Arcane, it doesn't ever cost you anything except the additional mana. So, for example, there's one that says you gain 3 life. That's 1 in a green to Splice. So the kicker 1 in a green, gain 3 life on all of a control player's spells that you can't ever get out of their hand unless you are an exactly black with a duress effect was just not worth. I had a bunch of Splice on Arcane cards in the first draft, and then I was slowly culling them one at a time, going, if this gets going, it's just ridiculous. And eventually I cut all of them. So the only Splice card left in the cube is actually Splice onto instant or sorcery, and it's Splice your skill from Horizons, which is expensive enough, and I think it's a funny pun that it's a splicer splicing, that I kept it in. And I have Precursor Golem, so I think it's cute that there's like that Golems Matter interaction that can come up. But other than that, other than Splice, the Arcane only matters for the Spiritcraft mechanic I mentioned.
It looks like there's like 25 cards in here that all just explicitly now say whenever you cast instant or sorcery, when they used to say whenever you cast instant sorcery or spirit.
Or spirit, yeah. There's a number of spirit creatures as well. But yes.
I was going to say about Splice is, you know, it's from a famously low-powered set, and obviously when the Splice has to care about specific arcane spells, and in development you can say, well, we make arcane spells a little bit worse because we know that they have this upside of being able to be spliced onto. The mechanic behaves a certain way, and I wondered if in this context there would be a number of Splice cards that just become immediately kind of broken in half. And it sounds like it's just the whole mechanic was just a kind of play pattern that was not encouraging what you were looking for.
Yeah, and in my Spellslinger cube, I'm going to include Storm. I like Empty the Warrens, as I mentioned. I like Chatterstorm. I like some other Storm cards. Tendrils, I think, is a cool thing to learn if you have like built up enough Storm to finish off with Learn and then Tendrils your opponent.
I learned how to ruin your Brind.
That's cool.
Brind. I tried to say brain and mind. I missed it all together.
That's okay.
Would have been a good line if I hit it right.
The fact that Splice onto a Storm spell copies the Splice on all the copies was just going to be a play pattern of disastrous potential.
Sounds cool, though.
Yeah, you can still do it with Splicer's skill.
Okay, well, that's the one time you can do it. It makes sense. You have been mentioning like, oh, I started with these splice cards and I slowly started cutting them because they didn't feel like they were the right fit. What you're describing sounds like a iterative design process, and yet you have also confided that you have not played this cube before. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what this iterative loop looks like, if it is an iterative loop, or maybe there's something else going on here that like, when do you change your mind about something? Because you're the one that put it in there. Yeah. No playtesting happens, and then you take it out. Yeah. What has happened in the interim?
I've been thinking. I'm always thinking. So I say I go through my cubes in waves all the time of like, oh, here's a new card has come out, or I found a card in a bulk bin that maybe is fitting. So then I'll just give the list another once over. I also have a process called the slideshow, by which with every new set, I make a slideshow to argue with my friends about cards I should or shouldn't include in my cube. And every time a set comes out and I look at the full set file with my, with my Strixhaven goggles on this pass, and then with my Desert goggles on this pass, thinking about cards for cubes, I'm thinking about the cube again in my new brain's current thought process.
So before this cube existed in paper, before you had any drafts, you were still excited for spoiler season because you would get a new set of cards to pour over and be like, does this belong in my theoretical cube that may exist one day?
Yeah. Again, even before I had it in paper, I was making such changes as I'm really desperate for a blue-black creature, for example, so I'm going to put Emmett Selch from the Final Fantasy set in. And then a few months later, I decide, you know what? I think I want this to really be a canon magic Strixhaven Kamigawa mashup, and I want it to be about the spells of the multiverse, and I cut all the universes beyond.
Yeah.
There's no playtesting in between that. It's just like over the time, I'm like, I think that's what I want this cube to be. And I made a decision, and I reversed the decision.
So the lessons you learned from running Arcane Lessons was maybe going to shave the environmental silences rules modification, because most people seem to just value it differently than you did, / wonder why this seemed important, and like maybe leave it in their sideboard, maybe leave it in the main deck, just, kind of didn't know how to engage with it. What else? You just are happy with how it went? You just hit it out of the park the first run around?
No, I have to reword the emblem, which is really funny as the judge presenting his own cube to players who then get me on a pedantic rules wording of my cube.
Yeah.
This was on my emblem. I wrote, all instant and sorcery cards are arcane lessons in all zones. And a player very helpfully reminded me, more than one, that prepared spells aren't cards. So when you cast them, they're not arcanes.
Interesting.
And I was like, okay, you got me. All instant and sorcery cards and spells. So I'm going to reprint the emblem. But, if I cut on environmental sciences, I need to reprint the play rate anyway. So those are my two big ones. I was testing a new Secrets of Strixhaven card called Antiquities on the Loose that is 1 white, makes 2 2/2s, which is already good start. Then 4 white flashback. And if you cast it from anywhere except your hand, it puts a +1/+1 counter on all your spirits.
The 2/2 spirits?
The 2/2s are spirits. So the first time you get 2 2/2s.
That's a crazy card.
Second time you get 2 3/3s, and I already have a spirits theme. Like Lingering Souls is in this cube, so there's plenty of ways to go wide with spirits, and then this is crazy. So the fact that it was a cool spell with flashback from the school set and said spirits matter, I felt like I needed to test it, but it's probably too strong.
It seems crazy. 1 white for 2 2/2s is already like...
Yeah.
It sounds like these spirits do not have flying. They're just...
No, they're just 2/2s on the ground.
Just 2/2s, yeah, because I play Talrin's Invocation in Sacred Geometry. Sacred Geometry is like I would say 80% cards people know and have seen a bunch, and then there's definitely some weird cards in there that like I just think are clean and fit my themes, and that most people have not seen. And Talrin's Invocation is one of those, and that's 2 blue to make 2 2/2 drakes with flying. I have it in there because I have 1 creature type per color, and I have Talrind in the cube, and so I thought having Talrind's Invocation was nice, and that sort of rounds out with Drakehaven as like my 3 blue token producers that are kind of like all similar vibes. Clean card, just a sorcery that makes 2 2/2s is really clean, and almost every time this cube is drafted, whoever has that card at the end goes, this card's really good, and I'm like, yeah. 4/4 flying worth of power that can't be answered by 1 rule spell is a very strong card, so I feel like 1 white for 2 2/2s is an insane base rate plus the flashback upside.
I think that was the most egregious card as far as changes I need to make. Other than that, I was really happy with a lot of the cards. A lot of people had never seen some of the Arcane Matters cards, like Hisoka's Defiance is 1 in a blue, counter a spirit or arcane spell. And then there's a black sorcery that is look at an opponent's hand to make them discard a spirit or arcane, kind of like a super duress for this environment.
Yeah.
And then the one that I was most happy with that the opponents of this card were not happy with is this little goblin called Ishi Aki Crackshot. Do you know this card?
I can picture it. I can't tell you the rules text.
It has
I can picture
wonderful
the art. Yeah, I can picture the art.
Standing on a goat. 1 in red, 1/1. When an opponent casts a spirit or arcane spell, Ishi deals 2 damage to them.
Seems pretty good.
So
quite strong.
You got to answer this little goblin if you want to be spell slinging.
If you want to do anything.
Yeah, which I think, I love goblins, so I'm probably overprotective of it. But when the players were like, this is ridiculous, this is what I'm here to do, and I was like, where else are you going to play against this card?
Also, make some of your instant and sorceries at least deal a damage to anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to answer.
Everyone can play Gut Shot.
Well, I guess Bones just hit it out of the park. Easy. Simply think about your cube hard enough, have really good intuition, and then it'll be fine.
Easy template for everyone to follow.
Yeah.
I also had a cube at this event that had never been played before. In my case, as I mentioned, literally not a match had ever been played. We had done a couple human drafts, again, just to see how the draft felt, because the bots on Cube Cobra, I think, do not accurately... I mean, they always have limitations, but I think they're especially out of touch with how to draft very novel cubes. And in this case, my cube is a desert cube. I'm talking about Take 5. This is my cube that is a desert cube, but it's drafted in normal 3 packs of 15 cards. So most desert cubes, as you know better than almost anyone, Bones, go up to around 18 cards per pack because you have to draft all your lands. So you need to have a bunch of extra stuff in there so you have enough time to take all your lands and still get on-color spells and have a sideboard and all that kind of stuff. With my cube, you only get 5 cuts, which is where the name Take 5 comes from. And that means that you're main decking almost every single card you get past. You get 3 last picks. If you're not going to play all 3 of those, then you're down to only 2 cuts from the rest of the cards you picked. And 3 of those are going to be second to last picks. So like you do have much less control over your pool and the deck that you're playing. Inside of that restriction, I am explicitly not trying to make this a punishing, resource-constrained environment. So a lot of desert cubes are about drafting lands in the sense that, like, it's really important. You're supposed to take them very highly. You could end up with a unplayable deck at the end of the draft if you didn't prioritize them enough and you have like 12 or 13 lands. That's a pretty common trope amongst desert cubes because, you know, if the whole rules modification is about not giving access to basics, like, make it really matter, I think, is the sort of logic behind it. I think the name desert cubes also kind of implies that a little bit. You know, deserts are harsh, resource-constrained environments. I explicitly wanted it to not be that. I was seeking to prove to myself that this was a viable way to draft and not end up with a completely unplayable decks. And so I've made a lot of design decisions to ease the pain of getting so few cuts. So, for example, I play a ton of modal double face lands. No other modal double face cards, just lands. And there's maybe 30 in the cube. There's a lot of them. Those are obviously just very strong cards because they are modally a land or a spell. So if you are worried you might have too few lands, you can end up with some modal double face cards. But if you have too many, it's fine because you can also cast them as spells. Similar to that, I also have a bunch of utility lands. So, you know, cards that are lands, but have channel abilities, have, you know, abilities in play, activated abilities that don't produce mana that affect the board in some way, creature lands, stuff like that. That just means that, again, if you have too many lands, at least these lands also do something and are spells. I also have a ton of colorless cards and cards with like colorless fail case modes so that you don't end up with like a bunch of cards you just straight up can't do anything with at the end of the draft because you got past 7 off-color cards in your deck. And so you can only make 5 cuts. You got to play 2 completely off-color cards. The examples I always give here are like I have a lot of things with cycling and a lot of things with morph. And, you know, morph is a color fixing mechanic. You can play any morph as a 3-mana 2/2. And that might sound pretty bad, but that's kind of the vibe of this cube. I want everyone's deck to be a little bit clunky. And I expected and wanted a lot of games to be ended by attacking with unflipped morphs or, you know, utility creatures. And on the flip side, I want there to be a lot of cool, ambitious, weird things you can do here. I want this to be my like sort of combo cube, for lack of a better word, a place to, again, explore and kind of like celebrate weird cards and weird interactions. That's related to the restriction, right? The fact that I'm not letting you make any cuts means I'm kind of forcing you to play with whatever I give you in a more heavy-handed way than a typical cube environment where you get to make a lot of cuts and as a player decide, I'm not going to take these risky cards or these conditional cards or these whatever low-power cards. I'm just not going to play them. Here, I'm kind of forcing you to because your alternatives are largely going to be unplayable cards in colors you can't cast. So I'm playing in that space by giving people cards with weird downsides, cards that like kind of do nothing. You know, the classic example being Sundial of the Infinite. Like, why would I want to end my turn on my turn? What's the point of that? And then the rest of the cube is also full of things that can make those cards viable and support them in ways that they can do either kind of fair things, like, you know, Sundial's fallback is always like, well, I'll take my turn, then I'll play a bounce land and end the turn with the bounce land trigger on the stack so I don't have to return a land to my hand, which is like a cool minor upside to like totally broken stuff, right? Like, you're cheating in Phyrexian Dreadnought or, you know, taking extra turns with Final Fortune and not losing the game, or...
Can you flash in Phage? Is that in this cube?
Phage is
Does
not,
that work?
but Phage has been on my list for a while, and I believe it does. I believe Phage is a triggered ability, so you can, you know, reanimate it or whatever and just end the turn with the Phage trigger on the stack. Phage often recommended for this cube. It's the right vibes for sure. So this is the idea of Take 5. And I have been recording a lot of YouTube videos about this, as I mentioned. So a lot of people have been commenting on YouTube. And if you're one of those commenters, thank you so much for your contributions. Same in the Discord server. There's an active thread where a lot of people have been helping me sort of muddle through this list and think about it. I think similar to your, slideshow group where you've got a bunch of friends that you'll talk through new cards with. There's been a lot of thought that's gone into the cube, but truly no playtesting, actual test these theories and see if they work. And so I didn't really know what to expect going into the weekend. I'll tell you what I was afraid of. I was afraid, one, that people would end up with a bunch of unplayable cards in their deck and would be like, this sucks and is not fun because I drew my unplayable cards. I mean, I think any Magic player would agree that it would suck to draw a card that you literally is a blank, that he's like a, worse than a Darksteel Relic because your deck can't do anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a unique risk to this cube because you are making people play so many of their cards, but I think it's something that people still worry about, even if it's not as, if this is like a unique context.
This is so pronounced. I mean, in another cube, I have to imagine you would just play another basic land over a literally unplayable card. And so you might be upset if you got to the end and had 20 playables and are playing more basic lands than you want, but your deck doesn't literally have a card that you could draw that does nothing in it. That's a real possibility here. I was a little worried about that. I was more worried about rounds going to time.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One, the cube is complicated. There's a lot of funky little rules interactions. There's a lot of funky cards. And also, it's a clunky environment with, not a lot of aggressively costed creatures, not a lot of, generically good threats. You have to jump through hoops in order to do almost anything in this cube. And so I was worried that, rounds would go to time and people would not be able to close out games or would get sort of confused and frozen by rules interactions. There's a lot of shuffling in this cube, for example. Another thing, it's just takes up time. There's a lot of complicated stuff going on. And then I was also maybe a little worried that at a baseline, it just would not be fun. Okay, maybe I achieved my goals. Maybe I proved that you can actually end up with a playable deck so people aren't stuck with unplayable cards. And maybe the rounds aren't going to time. Maybe games are actually ending. But any number of other things could feel bad about this cube, right? You could really not like the deck building portion. Maybe only getting 5 cuts just sucks and feels bad even if you're playing cards that are not unplayable. You just don't want to put them in your deck and you're not excited by these cards you're being forced to play. Maybe the gameplay is wildly lopsided because there are really high highs that are possible in this cube. I talked to players over the weekend that were like, I put 3 Phyrexian Dreadnoughts and play on turn 3. And I'm like, how did you even do that? I can't even think of how that would even happen. So there are really high highs, and I was wondering maybe it'll be just like a coin flip of who gets to do their broken thing, and the other player is stuck playing, unflipped morphs and hoping it's good enough. I hemmed and hawed a lot about whether or not to try to get in the first draft of Take 5, because I am typically someone that avoids playing my own cubes in events, which I joke that it's cringe, and I think it is cringe for some people, namely us with a podcast and a platform. I know if I bring my cube to an event, I'm lucky that a lot of people want to play it. They've heard of it before, and so I feel it is kind of cringe of me to take a slot from somebody that otherwise would want to play the cube. That doesn't apply to most people. If you're at a cube event with your own cube and you don't have an audience, I think you're totally fine to draft your own cube and it's not cringy at all. I just want to be clear, I'm not judging other people. But for me, I do think it's cringe. So I hemmed and hawed about it a lot, and ultimately I decided that it was worth maybe being a little cringe. I just really wanted to see what the first draft felt like. And I think the best feedback you can ever get from people is not them telling you after the draft what they thought, but being in games and watching them play out and seeing how things feel. There's so much unspoken context and information that is communicated to you by actually playing through games that really changes things. So I did rank it, and I did get in the first draft. People joked that I had put my thumb on the scales or forced it behind the scenes, and I did not. I just ranked it in Hedron Network and ended up in the pod. Though Max did come up and say yeah, if you didn't get in, I was going to put you in manually. And I was like, I'd be so mad at you if you did that. And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't tell you. And I was like, you would just violate my morals and not tell me? Either way. I did end up in the pod, and I thought the draft was really fun and exactly what I wanted it to be. I saw a pick 4 Laboratory Maniac, which I took, and I did worry at that point a little bit. This is the kind of card that I, as the cube designer, I know what you can do with Laboratory Maniac, and these first 3 drafters might have just had no clue how this could ever possibly work, and therefore not even think twice about it because they're like, well, this is just a bad card. I was I worried maybe I was taking a little bit of, I had a leg up, which I didn't want to have, but I know the cube very well. But I did take Laboratory Maniac. I saw a Leveler the pack before, and I was hoping Leveler would come back. It did not come back. Leveler did not table, but I did get a Doomsday late in pack 1. I actually must have taken it pick 8 or something. It was the last fresh pack in pack 1, but I came out of pack 1 with Doomsday Lab Man and was well, I have a plan. This is clearly what I'm trying to do. A couple things I thought were really interesting about my first draft. Number 1, I was so cleanly blue-black it was crazy. Like, I had no lands that could produce anything but blue or black mana, which I thought for sure almost every deck in this entire cube would end up with, well, I'm blue-black, but I took a black-white surveil land, or I took, a blue-white bounce land because they're half on color at least. And there's a lot of cards in the cube that are played to give you some benefit off of having the occasional random splash, right? I had one mountain I got like last pick that I played because I had an engineer explosives. And I was like, I want to be able to get this to 3 sometimes. And it really mattered, especially with the Doomsday piles, because I could, put the mountain and the engineer explosives in there and get them both. Yeah, it was so weird that I got to the end of the draft and I was like, literally, I just have blue-black duels and some blue lands and black lands, which was nuts. I myself had the experience I want a lot of players to have in the cube, which is I was now locked into this Laboratory Maniac Doomsday line and prioritizing interaction. I wanted to get a couple of card draw spells so that I could churn through my Doomsday pile faster once I had my Laboratory Maniac. And then I saw Port of Carfel, which is a land I added very recently on the recommendation of Max in the Discord. And he suggested it for the lands deck, like the deck that has Aftermath Analyst and like Amulet of Vigor. This is just a land that comes into play tapped, taps for blue, and you can pay 6 mana, blue, black, 3, and tap it and sacrifice it to mill 3 or 4 and return a creature. Bones is holding up 4. Bones knows immediately. Mill 4 and return a creature from your graveyard to play, which, again, with the like Aftermath Analyst, you can... if you have a way to sacrifice your lands, you sacrifice all your lands, activate Aftermath Analyst, get them back, Amulet untaps them all. That includes Port of Carfel. Now your Aftermath Analyst is in the graveyard, and then you can activate Port of Carfel and get the Aftermath Analyst back, sack your lands again. Like, that was why he suggested the land. And I saw it and was just like, this is so sick with Lab Man. Like, now... if I have 7 mana on my turn where I go to win and Lab Man in play, if they like try to kill it in response to the trigger, I let it die, activate Port of Carfel, get it right back before I actually draw a card, which I thought was very cool. Like, I had that moment of like, this is actually great in my deck, even though I didn't think of it for this context, which that kind of like moment of, oh, this card actually works in a way I didn't realize is a lot of what I'm trying to optimize for. I didn't know how good my deck was, I'll be honest. Before this weekend, I have never once in my life put a Doomsday on the stack. I had never done it.
I think that most Magic players can say the same thing.
Yeah, probably. Certainly most by raw numbers. Most invested Cube players, I doubt. I think most Cube players have probably put a Doomsday on the stack. But not me. Sorcery, black, lose half your life rounded up, and exile your library and take 5 cards from it, and library and graveyard get exiled. Take 5 cards from it and put them into your library in any order. So,
oh, really? You take 5 cards?
Yeah, you take 5 cards. I didn't even think of that. Oh my god. He admitted.
This cube is all making sense.
I had never played with Doomsday before. I am so certain I did not pilot or draft and deck build in a way to optimize it. My first round did go to time. Spooky stuff. It partially went to time because I did cast Doomsday in every single one of those games, and it was me being like, I think I do this. And I absolutely shot myself in the foot so hard the first Doomsday pile I cast. And the way I shot myself in the foot is I just shortcutted Engineering Explosives to can be cast for 3, and my opponent had a bunch of 3-drops in play, and I was like, well, the first thing I'll do, just to not die while I'm drawing the rest of my library, is I'll put Engineering Explosives on top, and then I'll play it and just...
And then you drew the mountain the next...
No, I didn't have the mountain. I had exiled the mountain.
Oh,
I had shortcutted to like, I know I can EE for 3 if I need to, and I just didn't have enough mana. And so I literally Doomsday piled and then drew an uncastable card, and my opponent was like, what are you doing? And I'm like...
That's kind of funny.
I'm like, I'm cooking over here.
What are you doing?
It's a counterspell, of course.
I drew the first round technically. I conceded to my opponent, who was a much better player, and because... that would be extra cringe to take a draw in your own cube. I just conceded, let it go. And then I lost my next 2 rounds, thus justifying my concession in round 1. Clearly, I was not the better deck in any way. I won a lot of games where I cast Doomsday. I did have one game where I went turn 3 natural Doomsday on the back of Urborg. Because, I mean, again, black, also not easy in a Desert Cube. Even though I had all blue-black fixing lands, I didn't have that many fixing lands. It was mostly just some blue and black lands, mixed together. So getting black on turn 3 is unlikely, but I had Urborg to make all my lands into swamps. Just cast Doomsday on 3 and then 1 on turn 4 or 5. It was really fun for me to set up, like, I would never put Thassa's Oracle in this cube. Like, that to me is Labman minus all of the fun. Like, the fact that you don't have to do anything, you just put the trigger on the stack and then it's all over. Here I had, like, drafted cards specifically with the idea of protecting my Labman. Like, I had to mimic that I was like, this will be out. And then when my Labman dies, I can make a token. And that happened in a game where, like, I would have lost because I went to draw my last card in my library, my opponent had a removal spell, I said, great, put it under Mimic Vat, make another one, win the game. That was sick. The Port of Carfel thing was sick. I ended up with Shelldock Isle, which was key to my Labman piles because you have less than 20 cards in your library when you have 5. So you put Shelldock Isle in your Labman piles, and then you get to flash in Labman, so it doesn't get killed by sorcery speed removal. You get to flash in response to going to draw your last card from your library. I also lost a couple games where I resolved a Doomsday, and not just ones where I resolved a Doomsday and did a very bad job. Ones where my opponent just had enough answers. They had, a removal spell for my Mimic Vat and for my Labman, or they just killed me on board because you do, in fact, lose half your life to it turns out. So it's a kind of risky spell to put on the stack. But overall, I felt like my matches and games felt good. It was really cool that my deck had this very focused game plan, and I had Perplex in my deck that I could transmute for Doomsday, which is exactly the kind of weird stuff I want this cube to be all about. I felt like Doomsday and Labman were viable, and I'm not the best pilot or drafter of them, so if I had 3-0'd with it pretty easily, I'd be like, this is maybe too good. The fact that I won some games with it, lost some games with it, told me that I think it's probably viable, and a better player could have more success than I did. Overall, things felt good. My opponents were doing cool stuff. They were also not doing cool stuff in some cases, which is part of what I want here. My matches against Melissa was just attacking me with little creatures. And I
love it.
That's
great.
I'm attacking you with Weathered Wayfarer and Burfolk Looter, and I'm gonna kill you with these guys. And I came out of the first draft feeling pretty good. The 3-0 draft in my pod was a Goblin Welder deck that everyone was like, it was Ollie. Ollie had a Goblin Welder deck that kind of had everything, had Welder, Engineer, Oswald Fiddlebender, and then many, many good artifacts to support that package, including Dreadnought and Altar of Dementia. And so I think their end game was mostly Dreadnought milling their opponent out with Altar of Dementia. And you can also then, the first couple of times mill yourself to find anything you need to, lock out that situation.
Ollie only cut 4 cards.
Yeah, that is cursed.
How do you feel about that?
Fine. I mean, I don't want to introduce a rules modification, and saying you have to play exactly 40 cards is a rules modification. And so I expect most players will cut 5. I guess, you know what? Aesthetically, I'm a little annoyed. Game design, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that Ollie would rather have played their 5th to last card than cut it in a pool where you get no access to basic lands. I think that's kind of crazy. So that's a good sign. Everyone reported that their decks felt functional. Nobody at the table was like, I have unplayable cards that I have to main deck. And I did include a ton of ways, again, to use uncastable cards, discard outlets, stuff like Birthing Pod and Fiend Artisan that will let you put off-color creatures into play if they're still in your deck, and ways to put them back in your deck. I tried to include as many supports, as many sort of, things to make it easier in this sort of harsh environment. And I think that part was successful. I think there were a couple matches that went to time. Did you look up the number of matches that went to time on your phone when I mentioned that? What was the number overall?
So it was drafted 4 times. That's 48 total matches. Mm-hmm. Would you like to guess the number of matches which ended in a draw?
So that would not have counted mine where I conceded.
Correct. It has to be a record put in as a draw for me to know it.
7?
I was going to guess 8.
5.
5. Look at that.
Why didn't we guess that? That's so stupid.
Now, some of those could have been the same situation where
Sure.
It was a draw and someone conceded. I mean, to me, that's a lot. I think on a regular cube night, at our local, game store or our local play group, I'm a little less worried because there's very little deck construction time. So, I think you said our pod also was the first to get to matches of anybody, at least in the first draft of the weekend.
Except for the vintage cube. You were the first weird cube to get to matches, I think.
Okay. After deck construction, the first one to actually fire. Now, the way that the event is set up, you get 50 minutes per round no matter what. Doesn't matter when you fire. So on a regular cube night, if there's less time for deck construction, that means we have a little more time to play the rounds. We'll see if that ends up making a difference. Part of me is just it's going to be kind of a complicated cube, and it might just run a little longer. I don't even know what I would do if I were trying to cut down on rounds going to time, aside from more pain lands and more aggressively statted creatures, maybe, but it's kind of antithetical to the goals of the cube, which is meant to be a very much a Brewers environment of do something weird and freaky.
2 related questions. One is, I feel like there are a lot of cubes that are interesting, valuable experiences that just don't make as much sense in an event like this, largely because of that issue of how long they take. And I think it's still worth exploring those and not say just play those where they're appropriate. Do you feel like that might be the case with this? More importantly, what made you choose to run this at an event like this first rather than just at our local weekly cube night? That's a little more casual, a little more forgiving, maybe.
Yeah, to the first point, maybe this is a cube that just doesn't make sense for events. I think that was maybe how Lincoln felt. Lincoln maybe posted something in the chat about a similar feeling. I hope not. And to be clear, I agree with your sentiment, right? If you want to design a weird cube that you expect the rounds to take an hour and a half, great. That doesn't make it any less valid or whatever. For the purposes of our like pretty established cube night with like a big group of people, like I hope this fits into our like mold of, we start drafting at 6:30 and you have to be out by 10. Like I hope this kind of fits into that mold and doesn't always end in a bunch of rounds going to time, or we never get to a third round because we let the first 2 rounds finish or whatever. So I hope not. I don't yet know how I will try to address that problem. I will say too that like the fact that literally everybody was brand new to this cube, I think is a factor. Like if we play in our local play group, I think a couple people knowing what they're doing more will move things along a little quicker. I imagine you might have had a lot of judge calls about this cube. I had a judge call even though I designed the cube. So I imagine you've had a couple judge calls about this cube over the weekend.
It was in the upper half, but I wouldn't say that it was like the number 1 or 2 or anything.
Okay, that's good to hear. To your second point, why did I bring it to this event first? I just need a deadline for things. And
that's a great point.
And, I could have just, I think I started posting videos about this cube maybe in January. I have to go check the YouTube page, or December or January when I started actually like designing this cube. And someone pointed out around like March that, oh, by the way, May 5th, 5/5 is a Tuesday. That's our regular cube night. Like you should try and have it done for 5/5 so that we can like draft it on that night. And I was like, okay, that's a goal. And I was like close enough to a point where I thought that was doable that I made that my goal. And then Max scheduled Saltbox for the weekend before that Tuesday. And I was like, well, it's going to be done for 5/5. I might as well try and get it done for Saltbox. And then that became my goal. And I needed a deadline. And I could have made the deadline, a couple weeks earlier so that I have time to test it. But I honestly didn't. First of all, I didn't really care. Like, I was not worried, frankly. Like, my attitude about this kind of thing is that I really do hear Richard Garfield's anecdote from when he was a guest on our show, like echoing through my head when he like gets hired to be a consultant on like game design, and the designers tell him about like, oh yeah, before we hired you, like we had all these problems, like this thing was totally broken, and like people could just do this, and it was like totally, overpowered. And he was like, well, that sounds fun. Like that.
Why are you smiling while you're telling me how broken that was? Like, clearly you've cut out the part of the experience that was really worth pursuing.
Well, and to be clear, I don't think it's necessarily that like that should have stayed in the game because that was inherently the fun part. I think what I take away from that anecdote is like the fun part is like figuring it out. Yeah. And like it's not the 6th month in a row of that being the most broken strategy and like nothing else is viable. It's like you were there and had an idea and kind of like sussed through it. And the other example I'll think of is like Jane brought the ball pit to the first Inland Northwest Cube Fest, having only played it once in one draft with a couple of locals. I think very similar, honestly, to your first draft of War of the Spark. And Keldon came to that event. I talked to Keldon before the first draft of that event, and he was like, I got this idea about that cube. I really think there's just too many loci, and I think having a lot of colorless mana is broken because everything's a sphere, and you can just turn through your entire deck and find whatever you want. And Jane has since cut the loci because I think her assessment coming out of that event was like, yeah, this probably was a little too good. Did people have their experience at Inland Northwest ruined because of it? I don't think at all. Like, I think it was really fun and interesting, and it was cool that like someone had to like test this theory and like go and like try and break it. So I think you have to miss so wide for the experience to actually be bad and like irredeemable that my attitude was really like, yeah, you know what? If I included a few, too many unplayable cards and people are like playing junkers, like that will be okay, right? That'll be like, you get to tell the story of the time that I designed a cube and you made you put Dune Brood Nephilim in it or whatever, and you had like no way to possibly get any benefit off of it. I just wasn't worried about it. So a combination of I needed a deadline, and I kind of thought it'd be interesting actually to like do it and then have this conversation afterwards about like what we learned from, running untested cubes.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I feel like, especially coming from you, a person who has designed a lot of cubes, and I feel like there was not a lot of risk there, it kind of added an extra flair to the event. That not only is this a bunch of cubes on offer, it's also the debut of something brand new.
Yeah, it was fun. I was really, very excited, especially that first morning, in a way that I feel like I'm a jaded old man. I don't feel that kind of, visceral reptile brain excitement often, but I was giddy, I can't wait to open a pack and see what's in it and see what people's decks are. The only other things I'll talk about in terms of balance and feedback I got throughout the weekend, most feedback was very positive, especially people I really respect and admire, like Parker and Ollie were both yeah, you just kind of did it. You did exactly what you achieved. And I was like, okay, give me feedback I can work with. Give me something I can that's actionable. So I feel really good about overall.
I can't do anything with I'm already perfect.
I know. I feel really good overall about the first impressions. And I value that very highly, but also in my own matches, I was this is what I wanted it to feel like, right? I cast Doomsday and I won. I cast Doomsday and I lost, and my opponents the whole time were doing their own weird stuff, and it just worked out. there are two things I felt broadly. I think the artifact deck is very strong, not in a way that needs to be fixed, but the only card I had anybody mention was like, maybe this is too good, is Goblin Welder twice. And Welder is a weird card in that it also has the ability to interfere with your opponent's artifacts, and there are just a lot of artifacts incidentally floating around. And I'll tell you right now, this is a cube for Goblin Welder to be good. I will not be cutting that card. I could maybe cut some of like the low-hanging fruit Welder payoffs, like is Ichor Wellspring kind of stupid because it always ends up in the Welder deck and it's like just free? Maybe, but like,
it also just feels like the kind of card that you can put in any deck, so it feels like
Ichor Wellspring is perfect
little
here.
glue card.
I think Welder is good here because it's perfect with all the little glue cards that are also perfect here, and so it's kind of like it just works, which my initial impression is like, I'm so glad it's good because that, honestly, it's a card that requires a lot of things to go right. Like, it's not just a broken card in a vacuum. So I'm happy that Goblin Welder was good. I've noted that. Maybe that means I put a couple more disenchants in. Maybe it means that I put a little more Grave Hate in. Those are the kinds of things I'm thinking when I hear Goblin Welder was overpowered, not that I need to cut Goblin Welder. The other thing I heard a couple times was people drafting a like lands archetype and feeling like pieces were missing for a lands archetype. And I think what people felt was missing were ways to sacrifice your lands. And to be fair, one of the last minute changes I made when I ordered the cards for the cube is I cut Scapeshift because it's $95. What is that? You can't get a printing of Scapeshift that's not $100. It's crazy. I will probably eventually shout out for a Scapeshift because it's exactly what I want here. It's a perfect, like, this card does nothing. I had all these lands, now I have different lands. What's the point of it? This just does nothing. That's a perfect take 5 card. I had no idea it cost so much money. It's very stupid. And the other thing that I think was missing maybe from the lands deck is any way to play multiple lands per turn. I had a couple people be like, I was looking for, and people told me they were looking for like Ice Till Explorer. I'm like, you're not getting that. You're never getting Ice Till Explorer, so stop looking for that. But maybe Exploration, maybe Summer Bloom, something like that could have a home here so that the lands deck gets a little extra juice. I've not had time to review the pools in detail. I imagine you haven't either from Hedron Network, nope. But I'm excited to pour over them a little bit. I really like that in Take 5. The deck lists are very easy to read. I can like very quickly go through and see which 5 cuts everyone made and like at least get an impression of like which cards are really not showing up often. And the one I was surprised by that I already saw on a lot of sideboards is Repurposing Bay, which is essentially a birthing pod but for artifacts. And Fiddlebender is exactly the same thing but on a creature, and that card was not only I think in every draft, I didn't see it in anybody's sideboard, but also was reported to be a very strong card. And Repurposing Bay just kept showing up in sideboards, which honestly, I'm not that sad to see because I've been trying to get more creature density in here. So I really like when creatures have the effect. If I'm going to try and get an effect in the cube, I like Fiddlebender over Repurposing Bay. And also, I don't love the art on Repurposing Bay. So for those reasons alone, I could see giving me an excuse to cut it, just seeing it in a bunch of sideboards. So yeah, I don't know. Overall, I also feel quite good. And the negative feedback I got was either some rounds went to time, or I had a couple people be like, I was not prepared for how difficult this would be, and it really fried my brain. And maybe therefore it was not as fun for me as I had hoped because I felt like I just didn't bring what I needed to bring to this draft to like have a good time. And that's fully a like expectation setting thing.
Right. I was going to say that's valuable feedback, but I think the answer there is make it clear when people are going in what they're getting into.
This is not a cube for your first cube night with the cube group. This is, for the sickos, and freaks mostly. To their point, I don't have a good primer written for this right now. So like it doesn't say that clearly on the cube description. And I think when I do write that, that'll be something I'll put front and center is like, come prepared to think very hard. And honestly, it fried my own brains, as we mentioned, my Doomsday pile into draw card that does nothing on this board state. Literally, my opponent had nothing under 3 mana value, and they had 3 mana value permanents. And I'm like, this card does nothing on this board state. What have I done?
Can I just share my highlight? I did not get to play this cube this weekend, but I did watch a little bit of it, and I got to see Scott cast Eater of Days, which is a giant creature that makes you skip 2 turns. His opponent Astral Slide, the creature that was going to prevent him from Strict Proctor, which is going to disable that negative effect. Astral slid that out, so he had to skip 2 turns, and then
skip 2 turns in turns, because then the judge then called turns.
And then Scott won that game. It was incredible. I mean, I think we had talked, Eater of the Days is maybe one of those cards that you look at in this cube and you're like, that card is so cool, it's so bad, but wouldn't it be awesome if we could actually make a cube where that made sense? And to not only see it make sense, but even make sense when it was still making you skip 2 turns was very cool.
The thing is, so Eater of Days, 4 mana for a 9/8 with flying and trample, which is obviously an insane rate. The downside being you skip 2 turns, which is a huge downside. Double time walk for your opponent is insane. But at the same time,
it is a big guy.
I theorize that in this cube, like, you could still do that, and now you have a huge blocker. Like, they need to remove your giant thing now. If they don't have a removal spell for it in those 2 turns, it's kind of unlikely that they're going to be able to attack through it and kill you, attack through your 9/8 with Flying Trample. So it's exactly the kind of card where if you're in a normal draft and you're like, well, I have Eater of Days and I have like 2 cards in my deck that like I can counteract this downside with, like you just cut Eater of Days. You don't put that in your deck. You play another card out of your sideboard. You play a basic land. In this cube, I'm forcing you to be like, well, I have Eater of Days in 2 ways to get around the downside. Fingers crossed, like hope it works out. And then sometimes it won't, and you just play it, and it just works because it turns out that that downside is terrible, but in the right context, you still just win the game because you have a 9/8 with Flying and Trample. I agree. That was one of my highlights for sure. I have a couple other anecdotes from the weekend that I won't go into depth here, but a lot of moments in like the gameplay happened that, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit of a Scrooge when I hear about these crazy moments in other people's cubes, which I'll admit is like hypocrisy. But like other people are like, oh, I made a cube where like this happened and then everything went crazy and all these things happened. And I'm always like, it sounds like you made a cube with no removal and you like let people do whatever they want. And now you're like excited that someone did some big crazy thing. Again, I'll fully own the hypocrisy, but seeing it happen in my own cube, I was like, this is very cool. And like just in the 2 drafts I saw on Saturday, because that's the players I got to talk to afterwards, there were so many insane board states that happened and insane things that occurred that are exactly what I want out of this cube. So I feel good about the initial progress and I already have a lot of changes I want to make. This is effectively our event recap, which we've done almost no actual event recapping. I went 0-3 in my own cube and had a great time. And then I 3-0'd the regular cube by drafting Red White Heroic. And I fully, like, we talked at the end of our episode with Adam about, like, whether it would change the way you draft the cube. And I said, I think it will actually a little bit. It fully did. Like, I drafted that cube totally differently, having just 2 days prior talked in depth about, like, theory crafting the best deck. I took Prismatic Vista first, Heroic Reinforcement second, and at that point was like, maybe I'm open to being like a red-white deck that is not heroic. Then I took Reckless Rage like pick 6, and I was like, I'm all over it.
It's really disappointing. Sometimes we joke about breaking a cube, and I guess we did it.
Well, I think you'd appreciate my list if you haven't seen it. I was splashing for Bloodbraid Elf.
I'm back in. That's cool.
Which was really strong. And I only had, in terms of heroic payoffs, like I had Annex and Cymede, and I count Dreadhorde Arcanist in this sort of category too. I had Dreadhorde Arcanist. Like, those were the only 2 cards that were effectively getting me to play like 5 combat tricks. So I think you'd be pretty happy about that, to be honest.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Anthony, what'd you draft in Assault Box?
I drafted 4 cubes. I honestly didn't have the best weekend in terms of gameplay. Just sometimes it's not your days and you're not going to win as much. I did go, I guess you said, pretty much right in the middle in terms of the rankings. I had the most fun in the Kuleshov cube because I did the best here and there were just really interesting matches. I played a green-black deck with a lot of like little synergies and little things that could overlap and often did in a way that felt very powerful. There's a really big graveyard theme in this cube as well, so having like main deck answers to things like that, like picking up on that during the draft and then having that payoff was pretty satisfying. Lost in the finals there, but pretty solid matches. Next I played the Wetlands cube? Holly's cube?
Yes, Holly's The Wetlands.
It's a desert cube, and I saw Risen Reef very early, and I thought, okay, this is cool because Elementals is often a 5-color deck. I know Risen Reef was like a thing at a certain point in Magic in that standard environment, and because it's often 5 colors in this desert environment, that felt like those 2 things could bridge together pretty well. Like, I'll get some random fixing, I'll be base blue-green, and get to play some other Elementals as well, and it just didn't come together that much. Like, I had a couple games, maybe 2 games where I like really got to do the thing of here's Risen Reef and then I'm going to cast another elemental for the next 3 turns. But often my opponents just had better stuff and a little bit of interaction just kind of took me out pretty quickly. But then we made ramen, and that was cool. Magdalena was in town from Philly, and they're a professional ramen cook, among other cooking skills, and we had a nice time just like playing in the kitchen together and cooking a pretty nice meal.
That was one hot, steamy house when I walked into it. It was very humid and ramen smelling.
We had a lot of hot pots of broth going.
Yeah.
Day 2, I drafted the Red Terror, which, look, I was up too late enjoying the nice ramen, and so I was sleepy, and I made it on time. I've struggled in the Red Terror before and did again. I think that my issue here was I just kind of got it stuck in my head from some early picks that, like, I'm drafting this, like, Jund deck, and at the end of the draft, it's like, well, I kept passing up all these great white cards because my brain was stuck that I was drafting Jund.
We've all been
and
there.
I didn't like ever find the right place to feel like I could make the switch. And then I look at my pool at the end and it's like, well, I'm barely even playing any black cards. Like, what was I really doing here? I don't know, which I think is an interesting thing to reflect on. It's like, at what point in a draft can you really find ways to just shift lanes, and can it be later in the pack than I think it is?
I've definitely, when I'm drafting carelessly or tired or like not that engaged, been in that mindset where I decide early on because of some picks that I am something. And then you get to the end of the draft and you're like, well, I decided early on I was black because I had like 1.5 really good black cards in pack 1. And then at the end of packs 1 and 2 and 3, I got, like 3 to 4 solid playable cards in another color that I just didn't think I was. And it's like, if I had just, and those cards I picked, those black cards I picked were before any wheels. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm black because I got this second pick this and this third pick this. And then you just lock in, and then you get to the end of the draft, you're like, I wasn't black at all. I just completely punted.
Yeah, I mean, the worst part, I've even had experiences where it's like, okay, I saw a 4th pick black card that I passed, but it put me in the mind of like, yeah, I needed the fixing land here. I felt like that was the right pick, but I took that as a little bit of a signal that black was open. So then it's like you look at your pool and I didn't even draft that black card. So.
And you gave it to the person to your left who probably took it and then cut you on pack 2.
So, yeah, things happen. Some highlights from this match, though. I did have a little bit of a giant theme and casting Calamity Bearer that doubles all damage from your giant sources after casting Tectonic Giant the turn before and just being like, would you like to take 12 damage from my 4-mana spell? Was pretty cool.
That does sound cool.
And then my last draft of the day was the French Vanilla Cube from Max, the tournament organizer. This is an interesting environment because the creatures just, once they're in play, they're just there. So my sort of theory, I think this was actually maybe the first time I drafted it, was, the creatures aren't going to generate a lot of value, so having a lot of spells that are going to draw me cards is going to be good, and I can just like trade resources and kind of be a blue-black control deck. And turns out my opponents just had bigger creatures that mattered, and so I'm sitting there casting Divinations and the occasional removal spell, and I lost to Bloodbraid Elf, actually. That was a surprising card to see here.
Guess once it's in play, it is French Vanilla. It's only got Cascade and Haste.
Actually, wait. I have to correct that because I actually did win that matchup, but I lost my other 2 matches. And I don't know. I think my theory about this cube is
You felt
wrong.
like you lost to Bloodbraid Elf in the same way you felt like you were
I
Jund.
lost that game. Exactly. It's really all about feelings here. But overall, great weekend, and I look forward to thinking better about these cubes and hopefully doing better next time.
Judge Bones, we got to end on the top judge calls of the weekend. Your favorite moments from being the head judge.
Absolutely. I have a notebook that I take with me to write down all the coolest rules interactions. I do think a number of these are from Take 5.
And you can verify if you tell me the cards.
Yeah, you can highlight each one that is. I know this one is Take 5, the first one. Saw in half, targeting a morph creature.
I actually don't know, and I should know because it's my cube. That's going to happen a lot, too, because there's a lot of morph creatures. It's not like a coincidence. So, it says you make 2 token copies that are half the power and toughness, but they're token copies. If you make a token copy of a morph is really the fundamental question here, I imagine, and not much else. I imagine if you token copy a morph, it's just a vanilla 2/2.
Well, because of Saw in half, they're...
Well, it'll be vanilla 1/1s, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, two 1/1s.
Okay.
Split that morph in half.
Cool.
Then you have Aether Vial and Phyrexian Obliterator, which I think is very cool.
This is also Take 5, I'm sure.
And Azmarina, Mordekaiser, and Ikoldakar.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't fit in the rules text of that card, Azmarina, Mordekaiser, and Ikoldakar deals 6 damage. They make the creature deal damage to itself. So... Phyrexian Obliterator did 6 damage to itself. All because of the length of a creature's name.
That's so good. It never occurred to me that's why the creature does damage to itself instead of
they can't fit
Miranda Mordebadebadubada doing the damage.
Yeah, they can't fit it on the card.
They can't say, like, this creature?
Well, it's a legendary creature, and they use the creature's name when it's legendary in rules text.
They couldn't say, you deal 6 damage?
Yeah, you the player now.
You the player?
Now we're
no.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a Modern Horizons card, so that's probably just a clever layer where they're like, get it?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it deal 6 damage to itself? It's a little puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, anyway, I thought that was funny.
That was really funny to the player that
both
controlled
of the players,
Phyrexian Obliterator.
Yeah, they like Violet in, and then I think they like blocked with it, and they got to do Phyrexian Obliterator things, but then both the players were like, oh, at the same time. Like both of them were like, that's something you can do, that's something I can do. Uh-oh. Like there's no foods yet, but we both know what's going to happen.
I've definitely been in that spot where I have like made a tiny or major misplay that is because I didn't notice something that I also know my opponent doesn't notice, and then I notice the thing, and I'm like, oh. I have to like be very cool about it.
Your eyes widen, but you try not to breathe any differently.
Yep. Yep.
There's a card named Remcorolus that increases your spells damage by 1.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is not Take 5.
No, it's not. Do you know the card Flame Spill?
It's a burn spell with trample.
This happened to me.
So, if you cast Flame Spill, targeting a creature with 3 toughness, Revelark in this example, and Flame Spill...
What happens?
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, so what's Rem Koros' wording exactly?
If a instant or sorcery spell you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus 1 instead.
I'm going to guess that in this case, 4 damage is put on Revelark and 2 damage is put on Revelark's controller.
That's correct.
Okay.
My first answer was incorrect. I thought it would increase the damage to 5, and then we would determine the excess in kind of the resolution of the spell.
Gotcha.
That's not how it works.
Interesting.
That spell, it almost is like combat damage. The spell assigns 3 and assigns 1, and then it is increased in the replacement effect.
I still don't get it.
Do you not get it? I mean, like, it seems like those are the only 2 viable options for how it could possibly work. Yeah.
I mean, it was my instinct, So buyback spells, this is in my cube. If you flashback a buyback spell, flashback prevents it from going anywhere except exile.
Yeah.
So the buyback doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
There are some effects that are worded almost like flashback, where you cast a spell from a graveyard, then exile it. One of these is Radiant Scroll Wielder, which is at your upkeep, you exile a card from an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. You may play that card this turn. If it would go into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. The player binned a buyback spell with some other effect, and then exiled it, and then they're like, can I buy this back? It's not ever going to go to the graveyard if I buy it back.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you totally can.
That's pretty good.
And then you can keep binning it
That's
and exiling
pretty
it
good
and
stuff.
buying it back.
Yeah.
So that one was just like a player checking they could do something cool, and they could, and I had never seen an interaction
Hey,
before.
Judge, check this out.
Yeah.
And you were like, I'm checking it out, and I'm liking what I see.
Judge, am I good?
Yeah, those are some of my favorite interactions, which is like, Judge, watch this.
Yeah.
I had some questions about shifting woodland and saga creatures, because they made a relatively recent change involving like Blood Moon, and there's a saga.
Yeah,
and the
because it
saga
used to be
creatures.
that a saga with no counters on would just immediately, as a state-based action, go away, but that's not what happens anymore or something?
I think there's a little confusion, because the Blood Moon reason is because they have no abilities. So then they're a saga with no abilities, and they don't have any chapters, which
Right.
means they go to the graveyard.
Yeah.
But because that would be really easy to give creatures in the Final Fantasy set no abilities, it would be really easy to kill saga creatures, like relative to their cost. So now they just, like don't tick up as long as they don't have abilities. And then when they have abilities, we're back to good. So people were asking me, like, if I shifting woodland in my upkeep to become a saga in the graveyard, like, do I lose the creature? It's like, no, it's just a saga with it has all its abilities. It just hasn't any counters yet. So if you go to your main phase, you're going to get the first chapter and
That's cool.
and so on. Yeah.
Very cool.
The funniest question, I think, was if I animate Celestial Colonnade, and I cast Terminal Velocity to make tokens that are copies of it with haste, does that work? I was like, well, first of all, Enter's tapped. So you'll make tapped
Yes.
tokens.
But
And also, they're not animated. This is not a good play. Can't recommend it.
you're like, I'm not allowed to disrecommend it either, but I will tell you what will happen.
Yeah, this is what's going to happen. Like, read the first line and then get back to me if this is still your plan. And then I just had various questions about Mirage Mirror. People just like, if I copy Basking Root Walla, does it have the +2/+2? If I copy,
Those are all take 5 questions, I imagine.
if
or
I
a lot
copy
of
this
them.
thing, is it what I want? Basically,
Copying is one of those things in Magic that gets... I feel like whenever I ask a question, a judge says, it's just this. And then I say, okay, I understand.
But you don't learn any abstract knowledge to retroactively in the
confused.
future, like reinvent it. I actually don't know.
There's actually just like, you need to know like what is the list of copyable attributes of a card. So it's not actually a trivial
it's
one
just this.
rule. It's simply this.
Yeah.
Well, here's one for you. If I do copy something with my Mirage Mirror, and then I quasi-duplicate it, cackling counterpart it while it's the copy of a creature, what will happen?
You get the copied characteristics of whatever it is currently.
And it will just stay like that when the Mirage Mirror turns back into a Mirage Mirror.
Yeah, it's just that.
That's what I would have guessed, but it's nice to know. It's good to know for real. Well, Bones, thank you so much for being such a great head judge of Saltbox, for being such a great house guest, and for everything you do in the Cube community, for coming on this episode.
Thanks for having me.
Should we plug your YouTube channel, your series with Jake about how you're old and Jake is young?
Sure. I have a little project called, what's it even called?
I couldn't
This is
remember
a
either.
great plug.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad you can't remember because I couldn't
Yeah,
remember. And
I
a
think
a
it's-
generous host would know for sure what it was called, but
I think it's called Magic History with Bones and Deinonychus.
Okay.
I think there's going to be 20 episodes. There will never be any more than that once we get around to finishing it.
I love a project with a clear horizon.
It's
you know?
just, I started playing in 2006. and Jake started in 2020, there won't be 20 episodes. That's not how math works.
It'll be way more. Or is it per year? It's per year,
It's
not
per
set.
year.
Yeah.
So it's like 15 episodes.
Yeah, 15 episodes.
Anyway, whatever the delta is, you do the math. I'm not a nerd. It's just I go through each year and tell Jake what Magic was like whenever I was playing at that time. Because I was a very different player. I started at 15, so it was a completely different everything. There wasn't internet yet. I just tell him what it was like in 2006. As I told him all the sets that come out, and we kind of think about like, here's cards that were new that year, like in relation to what Cube is like these days. And then at the end, I'll tell him what like a popular deck was at that time. Like the most recent one we did, I was telling him about how Delver, before the printing of Delver, was Canadian Threshold.
Yeah, I love Canadian Threshold Legacy decks.
They were using
So beautiful.
Werebear before Tarmogoyf.
Nimble Mongoose.
And they were using Nimble Mongoose before Delver, because like it's just these two very early threats that you can protect for the rest of the game. And then we got two better threats. And it's so funny that like since the printing of Delver, they're just Delver decks. Like that's still the best thing you can do.
Yeah, they didn't go back to calling it something else, or they don't call them, Dragon's Rage Channeler decks now or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just things like that, like little history tidbits, and also just going through each set. We have a bit at the beginning where I ask him if he can name the cards in his cube that are from this year, and he usually can't.
Even though he knows it's coming.
Yeah. He does a good job. He intentionally avoids knowing. He's like, I'm not going to look at this because I know what's coming next.
Sometimes too, I've heard where he doesn't realize that the card was first printed in a different set than the person he has. He's like, oh, I didn't realize that came out in this set.
Yeah.
Which is another interesting layer to it.
Yeah.
Check out Magic History with Bones and Deinonychus or whatever it's called.
Yeah, it's probably called that.
The link is in the show notes. And on that bombshell, that's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast is produced by Thinking Really Hard About Magic Cards and Speaking to Microphones About It, Anthony and Bones. Thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you, as always, for being the de facto Cube judge.
Thank you for playing. Bam, 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 bam,
We gotta do some. If we had a television show, we would do a sketch where we would like have you come out and judge the quality of cubes as cube judge. We would have like a tungsten cube you could judge the quality of. Here, judge this cube.
This is a nice cube. It's much heavier than it looks. The corners are quite sharp. You can see fingerprints on it. It's made of a good material. This is an excellent cube.
Great. I'm glad you like it. I like it too. I'll clean those fingerprints off for you.